So I tried before we went live. I was like, oh, I'm going to jot down some notes. I'm going to, give myself, because I've got multiple legal pads going here in the Panther-Lair offices. This is the game notes. Like, this is like the play-by-play and my notes as the game's going on. 6 or 7 pages here, 6, 7. And then I was trying to jot down some notes on a separate page. And, I just don't know if this piece of paper right here needs to be corrupted by notes about the game that we just watched. I don't want to start off on a negative side. I don't want to start off being down on this. Pitt wins 30-13 on the road at Syracuse. They go to the Dome and get a rare win by more than a touchdown. They covered. I think the spread, the last I saw today, the spread was like 9.5. So it actually come down from where I think it opened around 10.5. So they covered, and you don't get a lot of games decided by more than a touchdown in these Pitt Syracuse games at the Dome. 5 out of the last 6 were a touchdown or less. 4 out of those 5 are 3 points or less. Pitt has lost at the Dome. I think 2012 or maybe no 2013. I think it was 12 or 13, one of those two. They lost there in 2017. Pat Narduzzi has a loss at the Dome. So I mean, it's not a given that you're going to walk into the Dome and win, no matter how not good Syracuse seems to be, and Syracuse certainly right now seems to not be very good. But I can't say either one of these teams looked particularly good tonight. I can't say this was a particularly good football game, or with football being played well by anybody. But they got to win. And one of those cliches that I don't really care for in football is, at the end of the season, they don't ask how, they ask how many. That's great. And I guess that would probably be a good way to kind of put this game here tonight in a box and forget about it. But it's not that easy, of course. And we're not going to put it in a box and forget about it. We're going to talk about it for quite some time, and we're going to drink. Boy, howdy, are we going to drink, because you guys could drink during the game. I'm not drinking during the game. But when the post-game show starts, that's when we crack it open. And we'll get the whiskey. I almost did a shot before we even started because, let's be honest, I think we all deserve a shot after that. But Pitt beat Syracuse 30-13. Fairly. I mean, like, the game was never really all that close. Pitt got the 7-0 lead when Mason Heichel had the big run after the interception. Syracuse answers it with a 12-yard drive after their own interception, and then Pitt gets a field goal to go up 10-7. They get the punt return at the end of the first half, which was really probably the biggest play of the game, made it a 10-point game, and obviously Syracuse finishes the game with 13 points. If that, that punt return was enough to give Pitt the win, effectively sealed the victory. Pitt added another 13 points in the second half off of 2 field goals and a touchdown to ultimately set the score. But I mean, 4 minutes, less than 4 minutes into the second half, they're up by 13 points. They're up 2 scores. As Jim pointed out on Twitter, Pitt was up 2 scores, not really letting Syracuse do anything offensively, largely holding them in check, outgaining them by a significant amount. And Pitt fans were jumping off the bridge. And despite, all the things that were working against Pitt, they were still largely in control of this game. And I think, Max Brown said it on the broadcast. I mean, it felt like Pitt had controlled the entire game, and it did feel that way. With anything approaching a competent offense, an offense that could move the ball a little bit like they did in the last 2 weeks, I mean, this game would have been a blowout. This would have been, 56-13 or something like that. They weren't able to do it, though, because the offense struggled. More than we've seen it struggle maybe all season, certainly in the last 2 games with Mason Heichel at the helm. The true freshman quarterback making his 3rd career start goes 13 of 24 for 143 and an interception. He officially finished with 23 net rushing yards, but Pitt also lost 35 yards to sacks because Syracuse got 7 sacks on Mason Heichel in this game tonight. And that was ugly. And probably if you want to start with what was ugly about this game, and boy, howdy, were there a lot of options. They had 25 combined penalties between these two teams, and those are just the ones that were accepted. There were penalties declined as well. I mean, there were close to 30 penalties in this game, 30 flags thrown in this game. You had multiple plays with multiple fouls on them, at the end, which seemed to drag this thing out longer than it needed to be. But there were a lot of things that were ugly, but I'm not sure if anything was really uglier than Pitt's pass protection and the offensive line in general tonight. I mean, just not good at all. Mason Heichel sacked 7 times in this game. I think on the on the TV broadcast, they said that Syracuse came into this game with 8 sacks all season, and they get 7 on Heichel tonight. And some of that is Mason Heichel, learning on the job, as it were, and some of his, I think, inexperience showed through on a few of those sacks. But a whole lot of it was the offensive line just not protecting well. And I don't know what needed to be changed there or what they had to do to adjust it. I think there were a lot of things that could have been done differently, and I think we'll probably talk about a lot of those tonight, not just in terms of the blocking scheme, but also in terms of just maybe the plays they were calling and what they were trying to do offensively. But the blocking was not good. The penalties were not good. Obviously, turnovers with the interception, and just not great offense. And they finished with 260 yards of total offense, 4 of 15 on third down. They continue to stay perfect on fourth down with Mason Heichel at quarterback. Pitt is now 7 of 7 on fourth down over the last 3 games. They were 1 of 1 tonight, converted one right near the end of the game, pretty late in the game. Averaged less than 4 yards per play, finished with a net total of 117 rushing yards, 143 passing yards. Just not a lot to really like about Pitt's offense in this game. Conversely, the Panthers defense held Syracuse to 212 yards and, forced 3 turnovers and, I think played pretty well considering the adversity they were facing, which was far more substantial than the adversity the offense was facing, but the defense seemed to handle it better. Next man up mentality was taken probably to its logical extreme. I'm not sure if Pitt had gone any deeper into its depth on defense tonight, like Eric Heinschel, Mason's dad, who they, mentioned 75 times on the broadcast, probably would have had to go in and play linebacker because they had everybody playing linebacker. Kavir Baines-Marquez played linebacker. And I know he plays something of a linebacker role in Pitt's third down defensive sub package, but I mean, he was taking snaps in the base defense at star linebacker. They had Abe Ibrahim in there. Davin Bruton was in there. I think Manny Taylor was playing snaps at linebacker. I mean, the depth just continues to get decimated. By the end of this one, they didn't have Kyle Lewis or Rasheem Biles. Biles didn't play at all. Lewis got hurt. Looked like he took a knee to the head, and that's always a dicey proposition. Obviously, you need those guys back sooner rather than later. But lots of things to get into, lots of things to talk about, lots of angles with this game, and you guys are already filling up the chat, so we should jump into that since we are now rolling here. A couple of super chatters to start it off. Kyle Peterson says, great to get the win. Way too many penalties, sloppy game, but we will take the dub. I'll go to that. I accidentally clicked out of it. Yeah, and look, penalties, big problem. Sloppy game, absolutely. Offense not looking as good as it did over the last 2 weeks. And what was remarkable to me about Pitt's offense here in this game, particularly the passing game, particularly Mason Heichel, is all the things, almost everything they did well at Florida State and Boston College, they seemed to do the exact opposite. Like they weren't capable of doing any of the things they did well. And some of them they tried to do and they didn't do it very well. And some of them they just didn't even try to do, like attacking the perimeter, pitch plays, toss plays. I heard about this thing. It's like you have like a running back or a tight end kind of release out. You set a few defenders free and let them rush in, and then you kind of throw the ball over them and out to your running back or your tight end and the linemen and the other guys out there. They almost make it's almost like they're making like a screen in front of the guy that you throw the ball to. And I've heard that it's really good for, countering an aggressive blitzing defense. Now, Syracuse, I haven't seen the stats or the percentages yet. We'll check Pro Football Focus kind of throughout the night and see if they have updated things. I'm not sure if they've updated any of their stats from this game yet. But it sure seemed like Syracuse was blitzing all the time and sending extra guys at Mason Heichel. That seems like a way to maybe, slow down a pass rush, slow down an aggressive blitz, is maybe throw some screen passes, do some draw handoffs. And that never really seemed to be part of Pitt's game plan heading into this one. And I'm almost sort of inclined to believe that it was not part of the game plan coming into this game, like that those plays weren't available because they weren't called. We didn't see any of those plays, despite the fact that Syracuse made no secret of its intention of bringing the heat to Mason Heinchel. And Heinchel struggled with it. And that's not necessarily a knock on him. It's tough to play under pressure, right? It's tough to play with guys in your face. And, Mason Heinchel's stat line and his production and his performance, dipped as a result. Definitely a lot for him to learn there. And I think a lot for Cade Bell to learn coming out of this game. And certainly a lot for Pitt's offensive line. If Pitt's offensive line came into this game with any heightened sense of confidence from their performance in the last two games, they should leave that north of the border. That should stay in Syracuse. As a matter of fact, they should take it even further north, punt it over Niagara Falls and, or actually take all their confidence and put it in a barrel and ship it over Niagara Falls on the drive home. Take the long way home and go through Buffalo. And I don't know, why would you go past Niagara Falls on the way home from Syracuse? You wouldn't. So instead, take all your confidence that you would take all the confidence that it built up from the Boston College and Florida State games, take it up to the Finger Lakes. Okay, that's a little bit closer to Syracuse, right? And dump it in there if you're Pitt's offensive line, because they did not have a good game. They looked as bad as they've looked since the Louisville game, the West Virginia game, or a lot of games last year. Michael B says, Chris, not going to mince words. This was a tough game to watch. Injuries happen, but what happened to the O-line tonight? They were awful, and the penalties and the drops by the receivers. We can't play like this again or we'll lose. Not just picking one thing you mentioned. I didn't like there was Kenny Johnson had one he probably should have caught. Blue Hicks had a really tough one over the middle. One of the last plays we saw from him that I think he had his hands on and probably could have caught or maybe should have caught, but didn't. I didn't feel like of all the issues, I didn't feel like drops were as big of an issue as some of the other things. I mean, and the things that you mentioned, when you talk about the penalties, you talk about the offensive line, there were definitely some big issues and the kind of issues that if you have those come up again, maybe even as soon as NC State next weekend, and certainly once you get into those November games that we talked about, with such an eye toward the future on Notre Dame and Georgia Tech and Miami, if you do those things, if you play like you played tonight and make those mistakes, like you're going to get hammered by Notre Dame. You're going to get hammered by Georgia Tech. You're going to get hammered by Miami. And you might not get out of Acrisure Stadium with a win next week against NC State. So that's all got to get cleaned up. And I don't know if it was, kind of a letdown week after such a big emotional win at Florida State, or, if the injuries caught up or whatever it was. But that was not a great performance. Now, everything that we're saying tonight, that we'll say over the next 45 minutes or hour of this show, however long we go, we're going to point out a lot of the negatives, Michael B. And I think you would probably agree about that. I think you did point some of them out, and I think we'll probably spend the next week pointing a lot of them out. But for all the negatives that Pitt had, as poorly as they played, all the injuries and all the players they were missing and all the penalties they took and all the poor blocking and interception and mistakes, all the things Pitt did poorly in this game. And the list is long. I'll readily admit that, and we'll probably recite it and add to it throughout the evening. But for all the things Pitt did poorly, they still went on the road and won by 17. And is Syracuse good? No. I don't think they are. But you go on the road in conference, you win by 3 scores while playing decidedly less than your best game. I'm not going to say we ignore it and forget about it and pretend like it never happened and move on, because obviously you need to focus over this next week on how you're going to not repeat this performance when you have NC State at Acrisure Stadium next Saturday. And so, we're not going to just completely dismiss it out of hand. But there is something to be said for the fact that you were able to pull this off, that you're able to go home with a 30-13 win despite playing pretty poorly. One of your worst games of the season, certainly your worst game out of the last 3. And I would say probably the worst game you've played in a win, or the worst Pitt has played in a win this season. So, if you want to feel a little bit better about it this week and tonight, as you drift into the evening, that's probably one way to kind of rationalize it to yourself, is like, well, they played like crap and they still won by 3 scores on the road with a whole bunch of guys missing, without Rasheem Biles, without Kyle Lewis, without who else was on my list? Obviously, Blaine Spires and Zach Crothers out for the season. Spires missing another game. Rashawn Murray didn't play. Des Reed went out late. In addition to the guys that you haven't seen all year, Jaden Moore, and then the two linebackers, Marcelin and Bonsu, who were lost for the season. I mean, they went up there shorthanded and, still controlled the run, didn't let Syracuse run the ball, which is what Syracuse wanted to do. They didn't want Ricky Collins to have to carry this team to victory, even though he was playing pretty well by the end of the game. They wanted to establish the run, and Pitt shut it down. When they brought in that freshman quarterback and he had like a 6-yard run, that was like more than 25% of Syracuse's rushing yards at that point. I think they had 22 rushing yards at that point, and that was with his 6-yard run. And that was the start of the third quarter, I think. So, they did a good job preventing Syracuse from doing what Syracuse wanted to do and forcing them to have to do things they didn't want to do, which is why they end up, throwing 2 interceptions, throughout that game. That's why they didn't want to throw the ball, and Pitt was able to force him into it a little bit because they defended the run so well. So, you can look at it both ways. I think you look at it and be like, wow, if Pitt plays like that, they're going to have some real issues over the next 5 games. And then you look at it and say, well, they were able, at least for this week, to play like that and get out of it with a win. Thank you, Michael B., for being a super chatter, though. We always appreciate you for sure. Brock is a super chatter as well. Says this game was a carbon copy of the game last year versus Syracuse. Defense balls out and bails you out because the offense was non-existent. Well, a couple exceptions or caveats I would add to that, Brock. One, the defense last year scored the touchdowns. This year the offense still had to score touchdowns, and they were able to get it. They were able to get in the end zone twice. One run by Heinchel, one run by Goff, and then a bunch of field goals otherwise. So they were able to do that. Whereas last year they had to. Oh yeah, and they got the special teams touchdown too. I was like, how am I forgetting a touchdown here? There wasn't just 2 touchdowns, but last year they got the defense to score the touchdowns, and the offense didn't really need to do much, so they didn't. This year, again, the defense saved the day for sure, set up the touchdown, and special teams obviously cashed in with a touchdown at the end of the first half. And that actually brings us to, we shouldn't delay this any longer, right? Get the bottle out, because the shot of the game has to be the play of the game. And it was the biggest play of the game. It was exactly what Pitt needed. It was a huge play. And that's the punt return for Kenny Johnson. I'm not going to mince words or be funny about it or try and be clever or anything like that. We're just going to jump right into it. It's the Backshore Apparel shot of the game. And it's got to be Kenny Johnson, because Kenny, with that 66-yard punt return, again, like I said at the start, that gives Pitt 17 points. Syracuse only scored 13. Like, that's the game-winning play right there. It takes momentum back for Pitt. They were, slumping along, only leading 10-7, despite seeming to be pretty far ahead of Syracuse in terms of who was the better team. But they didn't have that separation on the scoreboard. And the longer you stay close against a team that, even if you're better than them, the more time they have and more opportunity they have to close the gap and potentially overtake you. So when Kenny Johnson returned that punt, which shout out to Fran Brown. I have no idea what Fran Brown was doing in that situation. Like, I don't know why you're throwing 3 times, 2 of which fall incomplete. So you're stopping the clock a bunch of times so you can punt the ball back to Pitt, give Pitt one more chance, either at a punt return like they got, or I think Pitt still had at least 2 timeouts, if not all 3. So maybe they could hit 1 or 2 quick plays and get into field goal range. Why are you giving Pitt an opportunity? And it paid off for Pitt because they get the punt return touchdown from Kenny Johnson, which ultimately became the deciding score. That was the go-ahead score that gave Pitt the win. And so Kenny Johnson, for the 66-yard punt return touchdown at the end of the first half that ultimately decided the game. That's the Backshore Apparel shot of the game. Backshore, we always talk about it. Run by Mike, big-time Pitt fan. Big supporter of the Panther-Lair show, big supporter of Panther-Lair.com. He's out there all the time, commenting and getting in on the conversations at Panther-Lair.com. You got to go check it out. Backshoreapparel.com. It's all weather tech and all weather gear, hats and shirts for whatever you're doing. If you're golfing, you're at the beach, you got to go check it out. Backshoreapparel.com. It's great stuff. And it's run by a Pitt fan. So you can get some quality gear and also support a Pitt fan because he supports us. So thanks, Mike. Thanks, Backshore Apparel. And if you're Pitt, you're thanking Kenny Johnson for that punt return touchdown. David H2P says, Peak, Pitt 1, play Wonderwall on that acoustic. Brother, we don't play Oasis in this house. But I appreciate you being a super chatter. I don't know what Oasis would have to do with this game, but I appreciate you being a super chatter, David. Thank you. Tyler Hawk is a super chatter, says the offense looked like it did against West Virginia. Couldn't run, got blitzed relentlessly on 3rd and long. Mason looked more like Eli in that he couldn't find open receivers and held the ball too long. Offense issue. I think in part, I think there's a lot of issues. I think when you have a performance like this on offense, there's a lot of issues. It's going to come down, on a lot of people. The offensive line is certainly one of them. I don't think that group played well at all. I don't think they protected Mason Heinchel well. I think they took a bunch of penalties. They had, 4 false start penalties? And at least 3 of them were charged to Kendall Stanley. So I'm just going to assume he had the other one as well. The one on the first drive, they didn't actually announce who it was on, but the other 3, they said were all on Kendall Stanley. So guess what, Kendall? We're just going to give that to you too. He had a holding penalty. This is one of the I can't wait to see the Pro Football Focus numbers to see if Kendall Stanley was charged with a bunch of pressures. You might as well just make it the worst game an offensive lineman has ever played. Kendall Stanley struggled out there, and it's a shame because this offensive line had I think really played well at Florida State. I think they did a good job. They opened up some running lanes. Pitt ran the ball really well at Florida State or put up a lot of rushing yardage. I think they opened up some running lanes. I think they did a good job protecting Mason Heinchel, and I think that's why he was able to throw for what he threw at Florida State, in addition to the yards that he picked up running the ball. In this game, it was, like I said, it was the opposite. It was the opposite in this game. They did not block well for the run. They did not protect Mason Heinchel. They did not give him an opportunity. And I think when you say Mason looked more like Eli, and that he couldn't find open receivers and held the ball too long, I think he was a young quarterback who started getting sacked, and that gets in your head a little bit. I think you start hearing footsteps, you start feeling that pressure, and I didn't really see a lot of situations where he maybe scrambled too soon. So it wasn't that. It was more, I think you panic a little bit, and he wasn't able to keep that cool. He's got to keep that cool, right? He's got to be cool Mason out there. And he wasn't able to do that. He wasn't able to keep that going throughout the game. And I think it's, you start getting knocked around, you start getting sacked, you start putting pressure on yourself. When Mason Heinchel has been at his best, and when Pitt's offense has been at its best in the last 2 games, or since he became the starting quarterback, it's when he's just taking what's there. When he's taking what the defense gives him. And I made this point, I wrote about it and talked about it a number of times after the Florida State game, where he throws interceptions on back-to-back 3rd downs. In both situations, he was forcing the ball downfield. And even if we don't have huge issues with the decisions he made on each of those 3rd downs, he still forced the ball downfield when he maybe didn't need to, when there could have been options, shorter options, check down options that maybe could have gotten you the 1st down. And it was really notable to me then that when he comes out in the 3rd quarter and the first 3rd down he faces is the 3rd and 6, he doesn't try and force the ball downfield to Blue Hicks or Kenny Johnson or anything like that. He takes Des Reed right around 5 or 6 yards downfield, right at the lead stick. And Reed catches it. Not only does he get a 1st down, he runs for 49 yards. Mason Heinchel didn't do that tonight. Not often enough. He didn't just take what the defense gave him. And, actually, he came out in the second half. And let me find my notes from halftime. Yeah, he came out in the second half, and he hit a couple big passes. He hit maybe not in the second half. Maybe it was even before that, because there was a drive where he had 1 or 2 plays where he Yeah, I mean, he got 10 yards to Jake Overman on a drive. I thought there was one where he hit Blue Hicks for like 10 or 12 yards, and he hit Kenny Johnson for 10 or 12 yards, and just kind of chipped away. And that's what he did well at Florida State after the interceptions. And it's what he needs to do when he's at his best. And that's not saying you don't take shots downfield. It's not saying you don't fire away. You pick and choose when you do that, but you mostly just pick apart the defense. You take what they give you and get the ball out and let your guys make plays. I don't think Desmond Reed had a target tonight. I don't think he had a single target. He's the ACC receiver of the week last week. He catches 8 passes for 155 yards, and he doesn't have a target. You can't tell me that's Syracuse defending him extra well. As a matter of fact, I think they kept Des Reed into block more tonight than they had all season. I mean, like the Florida State game, I think he had 3 pass block snaps, 3 snaps where he was blocking on a pass play. I bet he had more than that in the first half tonight. And, you're taking one of your biggest weapons off the field. If you need a running back to stand and block, then put Des Reed in the slot and bring in Joel Goff and have 2 running backs on the field. Because if you're not throwing the ball to Desmond Reed, you're depriving yourself of one of the biggest weapons on the team, and then didn't throw to him. He did not have a single target in this game. And so 6 carries for 38 yards, 19 of those came on 1 carry, so half of his yardage, although that's kind of what he does. I mean, he picks up, big chunks like that. But that's it. Those are all of Desmond Reed's offensive touches in this game. 6 carries. That's not effectively using your personnel. Keeping Desmond Reed into block is not effectively using your personnel. And that was, like I say, there were a lot of issues in this game, and that was one of them. The use of Desmond Reed, I think, was a major shortcoming in Pitt's offensive game plan. And I doubt that the game plan was that they went into it saying, well, we're not going to use Desmond Reed very much, but you gotta you have to find ways to get the ball to him, and they didn't tonight, other than handing it off to him 6 times. Again, if you need somebody extra to stay in and block because you're getting blitz like that, you got to bring in Goff and put Reed in the slot. You need Desmond Reed available as a pass catching option, and I just don't think they were making him available as such. Let's see. Let's get into some of the regular comments here. We'll still take super chatters. If you want to be a super chatter, click the little $ down at the bottom there of the chat screen. Kick a couple bucks to the podcast. We appreciate your support, and we will get to you jump to the head of the line, the front of the line, if you are a super chatter. Josh Newick says, grade the O-line play from terrible to horrendous to an absolute disaster. On that scale, Josh, it's somewhere in there. Josh Newick says, over under 0.5 starts by Eli Holstein the rest of the year. So, I mean, obviously the implication there is, or the reference there is to Mason Heinchel's shoulder issue. Like, look, that looked bad. And like, there wasn't even like contact. He didn't get hit. I mean, maybe there was something that happened earlier on one of the times he did get sacked and it did injure his shoulder. But I mean, that pass play to Kenny Johnson, the one that Johnson probably should have caught. It was a tough catch, but he should have caught it. I mean, I watched the TV broadcast like you guys, and Mason Heinchel looked like he was in pain, and he was, rubbing it and kind of waving his arm around kind of throughout the game after that. Definitely something to monitor. So, when Josh asks over under 0.5 starts by Eli Holstein the rest of the year, I mean, if there is an injury for Mason Heinchel, if he's hurt or if he's going to, if this shoulder injury progresses, you could see Holstein out there again. But getting ahead of ourselves here. Grant Sakuda at 11:05 said, let's get this show on the road, Chris. Don't want the refs to call a delay of game on you. Well, I scheduled it for 11:15 because I was like, I don't know what time they're actually going to start. We'll see how long this game goes. Game ended up going to like 11:05 or 11:08. I was like, I usually like to have a little bit of time between the end of the game and the start of the show so I can, like I say, jot down some notes and things like that. But then there wasn't much I wanted to write down. Let's see. Zimno says, I suppose it's always better to be on the winning side of a nightmarish game like that. Yeah, I mean, like, for as bad as that was, as ugly as that was, as bad as you're feeling about Pitt's offense right now, or, their prospects, they did win. And they're 5-2, right? They're 3-1 in the ACC. Not a bad spot to be. They've got a 3-game winning streak. They obviously have a lot to work on. They have a lot to improve, that they want to turn that into a 4-game winning streak if they want to get bowl eligible next week against NC State. But this was an ugly one. No question about it. Mark Thurkles, a super chatter, says, is it possible that Des Reed wasn't used as much because he's not 100%? Do you have any relevant info? I mean, I don't think he's 100%. I think he was questionable all week and a game time decision tonight because he's not 100%. I mean, I think you're dealing with an ankle injury like he is, that can take time to come back, and it can be re-aggravated rather easily. He was still on the field for a lot of snaps until the point came when he wasn't on the field. But we'll go through and kind of figure out what percentage of snaps he played before he left the game. And I think it was probably a pretty high percentage. They started with Jakarian Turner, and Reed, I think, came in on third down on the first couple possessions. Then they tried to use him as sort of the main primary back, the 3-down back for a while. And then when he got hurt, he came out. But if he's healthy enough to play, you need to use him in the ways that he can help you the most, which is in the passing game. And so even if he's not 100%, if you can put him out there, if he can play, you need to throw him the ball and try and put the ball in his hands that way so he can make plays for you and help you win. Because if you're like looking at it, you're like, well, I don't think he's healthy enough to catch passes. What are you going to do with him then? He's not healthy enough to catch passes, but let's run between the tackles. You can't do that. And I'm not making that face you're suggesting, Mark. I'm just saying, like, if he's healthy enough to do the things that they did with him, then he's healthy enough to catch passes. And there's something wrong either in how, Syracuse whether it was Syracuse, the way Syracuse defended Pitt, which Pitt needs to, find a way to adjust to, or if it was just not a game plan thing, which why wouldn't it be a game plan thing to get Des Reed involved? Something went wrong with Des Reed's lack of touches here. I can't be convinced that Syracuse was able to take him out of the game. Not with how much they were blitzing. With how much they were blitzing, they should not have had available defenders to track and blanket Desmond Reed. So something got messed up in there somewhere. Let's see here. Go back to the comments and questions. Zimno says, in hindsight, the camera operator was onto something by not tracking the ball. Yeah, not, for as much as we want to talk about it wasn't a great night for Pitt's offensive line, or it wasn't a great night for Mason Heichel, or maybe it wasn't a great night for Cade Bell. It was not a great night for the ACC network, friends. I mean, not a great night. I don't know what that camera operator was doing. There was one, a deep pass that Syracuse did not complete. And I mean, dude just like fell asleep or something. The camera just sort of stayed on one area around the line of scrimmage, even though the ball was thrown deep and high and far down the field. What is going on? What are we seeing here? And, broadcast crew, I really like Max Brown. I think he's really good. But I don't think that broadcast was the ACC network's finest. But that's what you get when you're on the ACC network at 7:30 p.m. on a Saturday night. D Tan says, what do we think is up with Mason's shoulder pain? I don't know. Like, I don't know what I don't know what to make of that. It doesn't seem good. It doesn't seem good when your quarterback's holding his shoulder and wincing like that. So it's something to monitor and keep an eye on, because, this team doesn't have enough injuries already. Bobby Fitzmaurice says, winning ugly is still winning. Yeah, like I said, I mean, that's one of those cliches in football, right? At the end of the season, they don't ask how, they ask how many. And right now, how many for Pitt is 5. 5-2. Pretty good place to be. RJM says, this has to be the longest game in college football history. I feel like I started watching it yesterday. Well, in about 9 minutes, you're going to be right, RJ. Now, you posted that comment at 11:14, but yeah, I mean, it's almost midnight. That thing kept going and dragging on. I think ultimately, let me see if they have in the official game notes, if they have length of the game. Officially 3 hours and 33 minutes. Kickoff at 8:36. What? 8:36 p.m. in a different time zone. Because the kickoff was at 7:36 p.m. and went till 11:09. So 3 hours and 33 minutes, which sadly is not that crazy in today's college football. I mean, like it that's kind of par for the course, 3.5 hours, which is insane. We don't need football games to last 3.5 hours, but I digress. Stop taking so many penalties. ZC717 says winning is better than losing. It wasn't pretty, but a win is a win by any means necessary. Doesn't matter how. As the late Al Davis says, just win, baby. Yeah, that's true. Zimno says, little did you know how good you had it when your stream went down. Yeah, at one point, I forgot when it was during the game, my screen just went blank. I was streaming it here on my computer, and I could hear, like, I still had the audio coming through from the game, and I had the live, like, stat box score updating play-by-play, which actually updates quicker than the stream. So I would see something come up on the stat sheet on the box score website, and then they would talk about it a few minutes later on the on the broadcast. But that went for a while, and that was pretty annoying. I wanted to be able to see. I think one of the interceptions, Cruz Brookins' interception, happened while I was on a blank screen. So I listened to it. It was like listening to the radio, but without hearing Bill Hillgrove and Pat Bostic. Benjamin Glazer says that was a football game. It is now over. Sorry about that. I accidentally canceled myself out of the. I left the stream and then I came back. So I'm hopefully nobody. I know. Ramon Escalante says, "Nice talking to you." No, I'm back. I just accidentally clicked out of the live stream. Hopefully, not too many people disappear. I don't know if you guys could keep hearing me while I was out. But anyway, let's see here. Go through some more comments. I might have lost some of the comments during my brief escape from the live stream. Yeah, Brock says one of those nights, and Zimmo says false start. Yeah, I got somebody threw a flag on my live stream. Let's see. I don't think we have any other super chatters that came in. So let's jump into some more comments. Anthony Tennyson says, I almost needed a shot just to stay awake. Easily the worst played game of the year in the ACC. Hey, man, the ACC can come up with some bad games. Like college football can come up with bad games, but that was particularly ugly. Both offenses played terrible. 25 penalties. 25 accepted penalties. Even more were called. It was ugly all around. Emilio Filippi. And I apologize if I got your last name wrong, Emilio. I'll just call you Emilio. Says Mason needs to become more comfortable throwing it away. Too many lost yards on sacks this game when it seemed like he had a chance to get rid of it. Yeah, and I think that's probably something you have to learn, right? I think you have to learn how to react in those situations. I mean, we watch it happen, and it seems like there's a ton of time, but you're processing a ton of information in a very short amount of time. And you have to learn as you go how to handle those situations. You know what I mean? Like you have to learn as you play more and more how to get comfortable in those situations, and what to do in those situations when you're getting chased, when you're scrambling. Who your options are, who's going to be available, who's a hot receiver, and how to keep your eyes downfield and when to just throw it away. He made so many plays in the last 2 weeks with his legs where a play broke down and he scrambled. Hell, he made it on the first drive of the game, right? He made a 36-yard touchdown run on a scramble because the play broke down. And so he did that so much. He's done that so much that I think he wants to default to it when the pressure gets to him. But that's not always going to be an option. Teams are going to be able to – teams know that's a weapon you have. They know that's something you're able to do to that you can get out and run like that, and they're going to game plan for it, and they're going to prepare for it, and they're going to be ready for you to try to get those scrambles. So you've got to, you're going to have to handle yourself in the pocket a little bit better, because whatever Syracuse did tonight, NC State's probably going to try and find ways to do something similar to make life difficult on you, because it seemed to be effective. And maybe that's blitzing a lot. Maybe that's certain coverage things they did. But they're going to try and do it too, because why wouldn't you? It worked, right? The Skittery says Heinkel straight up played trash. Yeah, it was the worst of his. You know what? That was Mason Heinkel's worst career start. Michael Balsaric says the O-line is back to being a problem. They've got a lot of work to do. They have a lot to clean up. Ramon Escalante says, pretty sure I saw fifth string linebackers on the field tonight. Woo. Yeah, you had, so first you had Nick Lappy starting, and then Lappy, I think, might have left the game at some point, because we didn't really see him late in the game. Braylon Lovelace played the whole game. Iron Man. Kyle Lewis never came out until he got hurt. When he got hurt, Cam Lindsey came in. Lindsey played most of the snaps. I want to say, Kavir Baines Marquez was in there at the star linebacker. Abe Ibrahim came in at the money linebacker. I think Manny Taylor was in there. I think that's who 38 is. 38 was in. I guess I should double check the roster. Well, you know what? I was starting to go to the official. Yeah, Emmanuel Taylor. Manny Taylor, a true freshman, came in. He was playing at one point. Which, yeah, I mean, that's down the depth chart. Like, you want to talk about Pitt's official depth chart? I do have that. Pitt's official depth chart at linebacker. All right, so let's go through here. Star linebacker, Kyle Lewis started, got hurt, came out. Cam Lindsey replaced him. Cam Lindsey took some snaps off. Manny Taylor, third string linebacker, was in. Mike linebacker, you have Braylon Lovelace backed up by Nick Lappy and Abe Ibrahim. Lovelace played the entire game. Lappy and Ibrahim both played, but they played at the money linebacker spot because Rasheem Biles was out. He's the listed starter. Nick Lappy's the listed backup. He started the game, but I don't think he finished the game. There were a decent number. I'll have to go back and look at my notes and I'll have to watch the tape. But I feel like he came out at a certain point and did not return. So you saw a lot of Abe Ibrahim late in the game. And then Lindsey's another listed backup at money linebacker. So, this was a position group at linebacker where when the season started, the Duquesne game, they had very little depth, very little usable depth at linebacker. And now, this game, they come into it missing another guy, missing one of their top guys, a guy who's been arguably their best defensive player. And if it's not him, it's Cruz Brookins. Rasheem Biles has been great this year. He's out, can't play, doesn't play. And then Kyle Lewis gets hurt and he goes out. So you end up with, like you said, third, fourth, fifth string linebackers out there. And I think you can, we're not going to be too negative after a win because it was a win and Pitt ended up winning this game despite all the, the things that either weren't going well or weren't working in their favor. But the effort on defense with in the situation they're in, with the depth that they got and the depth issues they have and the injury issues they have, for them to, kind of step up and play this game. And no, Syracuse isn't a very good offense. Their quarterback struggled for most of the game. And then for a few drives, they put in a freshman quarterback for a reason that I don't know. I guess because Fran Brown is smarter than me. And I never suggested otherwise. But this defense played really well and, really gave up one touchdown drive. Let me bring up the drive charts real quick. Syracuse had one drive that was longer than 31 yards. And that's it. That was their long touchdown drive in the fourth quarter. And really, they had 3 drives all game. So officially, they had 14 possessions. They had 3 drives that gained more than 13 yards. They had a 9-play, 27-yard drive in the second quarter where they punted. They had a 5-play, 31-yard drive where they threw an interception, and then the 12-play, 65-yard drive that scored a touchdown. Their other drives gained 1, 8, 10, 12, 13, 3, 8, 13, -11, -10, and -1. Like, Pitt's defense did the job today. They did the job. They get a lot of credit. They played really well, despite, shoot, man. I mean, like, Jimmy Scott is the only man left standing. You talk about depth charts. Let's look at the defensive end depth chart. Okay, I'm going to read you the names on Pitt's defensive end depth chart. Starter at one defensive end position, Blaine Spires or Jaden Moore. They were both out tonight. Backed up by Joey Zielinski and Nate Temple. Well, those guys played. At the other defensive end spot, Jimmy Scott. He was there. He started. He played. Maverick Grazio, who played, like, he might have played the last snap, the fourth down, the final fourth down, I think was the one time I noticed Maverick Grazio out there. So out of like 6 guys listed on the depth chart at defensive end, you had 4 available. 3 of them actually played, and 1 of them started. And they still go out and have the game that they had. And hold Syracuse, who's not a good offense. Like, I'm not going to pretend like Syracuse is a good offense, but they held him in check. And ultimately, held him to 13 points, which gave, Pitt's offense and special teams a chance to win the game. Some super chats came in here. Chevy Troutman says, you're a super chatter, but I don't have your comment, man. You got to put your comment in the super chat. Whiskey Coach says, we are absolutely decimated with injuries and absurdly undisciplined, but we'll take the win. Chris, I hope you're ready for some reps at defensive end next week. Look, we're all going to have to do our part here, I think. Games at Acrisure Stadium, 3:30 kickoff. Get down there a little bit early. Start warming up. They might need you to put on some pads. Although defensive end was not the position that took the most hits tonight. Jimmy Scott got hurt and missed a little bit of time. But linebacker was the spot that just keeps getting worse and worse for depth. I don't know when Rasheem Biles is going to be back. And now, who knows how long Kyle Lewis is going to be out. And you got through this game playing with Nick Lappy and A.B. Ibrahim and Cam Lindsey. And, just stat-wise, Cam Lindsey was Pitt's leading tackler, tied for Pitt's leading tackler with 7 tackles. Nick Lappy also had 7 tackles. So 2 of your reserve linebackers finished with 7 tackles in this game. Braylon Lovelace had 5. Kabir Baines Marquez had 5 tackles. Other notable stats. I mean, Lindsey and Lappy both had 2 tackles for loss. Francis Brew, Isaiah Neal, Jimmy Scott, and Joey Zielinski each had 1 tackle for loss. Isaiah Neal, he had one of Pitt's 2 sacks. Nick Lappy had the other one. And then obviously the interceptions. Kabir Baines Marquez gets an interception, 57-yard return for him. Cruz Brookins gets a pick. And Tamon Lynham got a pick on Syracuse's first drive that helped set up Pitt's first touchdown. So some strong individual performances there. But like it feels like they're living on a thin line, Like whoever that was said I should play Oasis on the acoustic guitar. We're gonna play the Kinks. We're gonna play Living on a Thin Line because I think that was the Kinks. That's where Pitt's defense is right now. Like I don't really see how their depth could get, how their depth situation could get worse, but they keep finding ways for it to get worse. And, at some point you're going to hit bottom on that where it just becomes too much. Like you've just lost too much of your talent and your depth and your starters, and you can't sustain. And I'm worried that they're at that point or getting very close to it. Another super chatter here. There's Chevy Troutman says, Syracuse doubling season sack total in one night is good, right? Look, I'd much rather sit here and talk about how the defense was resilient in the face of all the adversity and losing players to injury and everything than talk about Pitt's offensive line anymore, because no, that was not good. They did virtually double their sack total. They said on TV that Syracuse came into the game with 7 or 8 sacks on the season. They had 7 tonight against Pitt, and they blitz like crazy. And it'll be interesting. Pro Football Focus doesn't have the numbers up yet, but I'll be really interested to see how they're, what the pressure numbers look like as far as how many pressures Syracuse was able to get and how many they got from blitzing. Because if they came out and blitzed like crazy and that, did the job against Mason Heichel in this offensive line, then the blueprint's out there. And you're going to have to find a way to deal with it. You're going to have to find a way to adjust to it. And you're going to have to find a way to beat it. Because NC State's going to do the same thing. Why wouldn't they? Let's get back into the comments and questions here. Lamar Fullard says, Pittsburgh Panthers win today. They sure did. The Skittery says, I didn't know half of our team today. There were some guys out there that, you might have had to dig deep a little bit. Tisha MO02 says, sadly, Mason sucks. Time for Gonzalez. How quickly Pitt fans turn on their own, although I think this is probably said in jest. Gregory Calvert says, this game set football back years, but a win is a win. Gerard says, Kendall Stanley did not have a good game. No, he didn't. Dale Gribble says, I got to be honest, I don't even know if I want to go to next week's game. It's just penalty, injury, penalty, injury, penalty, injury. You get the point. I do get the point. And I have nothing else to say about that. Michael Balsaric says, penalties are a direct reflection on the coaching staff. Yeah, to some extent. Yeah. I wonder if there was something happening that caused Kendall Stanley to jump at least 3 times. And again, like I say, that first false start, the one on Pitt's opening drive, they didn't say a number, or the referee didn't have his microphone turned on or something like that. And I couldn't really tell from watching the video who jumped, but we might as well just chalk it up to Kendall Stanley. He had 3 other false starts. Why not give him the fourth one? I mean, like I might as well get the clean sweep, It'd be unfortunate. Nobody cares if you got 3 out of the 4 false starts. But if you got them all, then you've accomplished something. So we'll give that to Kendall Stanley. But maybe there was something going on over there. Maybe, I'll have to check. I haven't gotten a chance to see Jim's transcript of Pat Narduzzi's post-game comments. I'm sure he'll have it up there soon at Panther-Lair.com. Jim's up at the Dome. And I'm sure he'll get the video posted. Just kind of looking around to see if he's got it on YouTube yet or putting it on the website. Yeah, he's got the post-game. Pat Narduzzi's post-game is on YouTube. So if you want, don't go watch it now. Watch it when we get done with the post-game show. But I'm sure, I wouldn't be surprised if Narduzzi had something like, well, Syracuse was doing this or doing that, and that's what caused Kendall Stanley to jump so much. Yeah, I am opening a White Claw because thirsty. Ugh. Let's see. Zapirk says, what was with the double penalties Pitt got back-to-back near the end? I mean, it was just a disaster at the end. Syracuse when Syracuse scored a touchdown, their second touchdown drive, they officially, let me see what they officially got as far as how long that drive was. Officially, it was credited as 12 plays. They snapped the ball like 14 times on that drive. But, there was a holding call on Syracuse. There was another holding call on Syracuse. There was a pass interference call on Pitt. There was another holding call on Syracuse. And so they snapped the ball a ton of times. When Pitt got the ball back, let me see. Well, so it got really ugly after that because they got the onside kick, recovery. They're down 23-13. Syracuse recovers the onside kick. They got the ball at their 45. They get Pitt to jump off sides on 2nd and 10, Isaiah Neal. And then they get a false start, so it's back to, 2nd and 10. They get a holding call, so it's 2nd and 15. They get another false start, so it's 3rd and 20. So Syracuse was doing just as poorly as Pitt in this regard because they got all those penalties. And then Pitt gets the ball back after getting a stop on first down or getting a stop on fourth down. They drive their 3rd and 1 from the 26. They, Mason Heichel scrambles for 2 yards, gets a face mask penalty. It's 1st and 10 at the 12. And here's where everything falls apart. You get an illegal motion penalty on Zion Fowler-El. This was the one where Malachi Thomas looked like he scored a touchdown. You get an illegal motion penalty. Actually, hold on 1 second. Because we actually haven't talked about this. We're almost an hour into this. So let's set the scene, okay? So Pitt gets the stop on fourth down. They're up 23-13. It's 5.5 minutes left to go. They convert a first down. They get a penalty. They're at 1st and 10 from the 12. Clock's around like 4:30 at this point. They snap the ball with literally at least 25 seconds still on the play clock, with the game clock rolling. And they're only winning by 10 points. There's still 4.5 minutes left to go in the game. And they snap the ball with like 25 seconds left to go on the play clock, with the game clock rolling. The game clock wasn't stopped. If the game clock was stopped, all right, snap it whenever. It doesn't matter. The game clock was rolling after the first down and the penalty. And they snap it with like 25 seconds. Even if you're up 10 points, even if you're you're at the 12, run the clock. This is basic elementary stuff. I was saying that. I was like, what am I watching? What is going on here? Why did they snap the ball? And then when they snapped it, it didn't matter because they had illegal motion. And then at the end of the play, who was it? Oh, our friend Kendall Stanley shoves a guy into the ground, gets a unnecessary roughness penalty for 15 yards. And they enforce both of the penalties. So 1st and 10 is now 1st and 30. And they snap it again. And they run a play. And they get 2 more penalties. 5 players in the backfield, another procedure call, and then a holding penalty on Lyndon Cooper. And they actually decline both penalties. So, we're talking about, there were 25 penalties in this game. I mean, just from those 2 declined penalties, now there's up to 27. And I think there was at least 2 or 3 more declined penalties. So it was probably close to 30 flags thrown in this game. But they decline it. So it's 2nd and 31. And Pitt obviously, makes it up. They end up getting, 14 yards on a pass to Kenny Johnson. They get 15 yards on a pass to Raphael Williams. And then Juelz Goff runs for 2 yards on 4th and 2. Nice recovery from being at 2nd and 31 because you're just stepping on your own feet. And that's the nicest thing we could say. And it's like 12:15, Saturday night into Sunday. So I guess we'll keep our language, clean since it's, Sunday now. But like, what a mess. What an absolute mess. 4 penalties called on 2 snaps. And not all 4 were charged to Pitt. But yeah, I guess, but there again, we keep like saying like all the things that they did poorly. And, I keep saying like, well, you can counter that by saying, well, they did all these things poorly. They had all this adversity and all these injuries and all these penalties and all this different stuff. And they still managed to win by 17 points on the road. We can do this too. That they took all these stupid penalties and made all these mistakes and put themselves in 2nd and 31 and still ended up getting a first down out of it a couple snaps later. So shout out to them, I guess. Let's see here. Try and get a few more comments and questions in here. I know it's getting late into the evening, and I probably should write something about Pitt football and not just sit here and talk about it. Here we go. Blackman614 says Syracuse had 2 weeks to prepare. Their defense was ready. The receivers recovered and got pressure on the freshmen. They did. I don't know if it's because Syracuse had an extra week to prepare for it or not. Because they had tape from the Boston College game, but they still would have had a regular 1 week to prepare based off the tape from the Florida State game. So I'm sure that helped. Pitt just has to have a better answer when teams want to be aggressive like that. Brock said Kendall Stanley may need to take a seat on the bench, but to be fair, that entire unit was abysmal tonight. Okay, like maybe you do need to bench Kendall Stanley, but like he's already the backup. If you bench him, you're going to your third string tackle. And this was the reason they brought in Kendall Stanley and Keith Gouvet and Jeff Percy, was so if they had injuries or when they had injuries, they would have quality depth to fill in for those guys. And that's where they're at right now. They're using that depth. Kendall Stanley is that depth. So I don't think you can really bench him, because then you're down to your third string left tackle. And I don't think that's what you want. Andrew says Mason's shoulder is a worry moving forward. Yep, I agree about that. Ryan says, I was listening to the game on the radio in the car, and they mentioned Abe Ibrahim, a walk-on linebacker, was lined up at defensive end. I didn't see that. I saw him, like, he was playing close to the line of scrimmage on third down, in that third down defensive sub package where they only have 3 down linemen and 3 linebackers out there. I saw him doing that. I didn't see him play defensive end. I saw Jimmy Scott, Joey Zielinski, Isaiah Neal, Nate Temple, Maverick Grazio. I didn't see Abe Ibrahim playing defensive end. Could be wrong. Mark Shoju says, just when we thought we solved our problems they managed to take major strides backwards. Well, it's an ongoing process, man. It's an ongoing process where each week you're facing new challenges. Each week you're seeing different defenses and different looks and different coverages and different pressure packages, and you have to adjust to them. And you have to adjust through the week as you make your game plan, and then you have to adjust on the fly in the game. When you say, okay, this is what they're doing, here's how we have to respond to it. And I don't think that really happened tonight. At least not well. David Allen says the offensive talent and depth is a question mark, reminding me of the offense last year once some good O-linemen went down. Yeah, a little bit. Priya says Syracuse planned and executed on defense. They did. Mark Shilaju says Cade Bell called a horrible game. He made no adjustments to all the pressure. He needs to do a better job. I think they needed to do some things to take advantage of the pressure, other than just keeping Desmond Reed in the block. Not take advantage of the pressure, but make Syracuse pay for being that aggressive. And that never seemed to really be something they adjusted to or something they did in response to the pressure that Syracuse was bringing. Andrew says another Saturday. There it is. Another Saturday with a Pitt win and a Penn State loss. West Virginia was also destroyed to move to 2-5. I don't think you want to celebrate West Virginia losing all that much, because every time West Virginia loses, that loss, Pitt's loss to West Virginia, looks worse and worse. So yes and no. Ramon Escalante says, I've seen all I need to see from Cade Bell at this point. I mean, bro, they averaged like 500 yards per game over the last 2 games and 40-some points per game. I think you could allow him to have a down game or an off game, or one where he probably could do things a little bit better after the 2 games that he just had. Mark Shoju says if Pitt gets any more injuries, they'll be sending letters for mercy to Baldwin High School. That's a good one. Dale Gribble says, we got lucky. Everybody was terrible, but a win is a win. 5-2 is 5-2. I'll take it for now. Yeah, and if they bounce back, if they do things better next week, if they have a better game plan on offense and they adjust to defensive aggressiveness or coverages or blitz packages better, then we'll look back and say, well, that Syracuse game, that was a rough one, but they survived. They got the win and moved on and took steps forward. And like over a 12-game season, you're going to need games like that. Look, you could go back to the Florida State game, and I think they played really well in that game. Oh, look, the thumbs up thing worked. You could go back to the Florida State game. I think they played well in that game. But the reality is, like, that when Mason Heichel fumbled and that ball bounced and Jakirian Turner was able to recover it, that's a huge play in that game. And sometimes you just need the ball to bounce your way. And in that game, the ball bounced Pitt's way. I just stopped making a thumbs up. Can I do other ones? What's the double peace sign? I forget. Confetti. Hooray. the ball bounced Pitt's way in a crucial moment at Florida State. And in this game tonight, Pitt didn't play their best. They struggled. They played poorly and still came out with a 17-point win. And I think if you're going to have a successful season, unless you're, the top of the heap, the tip of the spear, you're going to have some games like that. You're going to have some games where you just get lucky where the ball bounces. There was a good piece in, I want to say, The Athletic. Bruce Feldman, I think, was maybe Bruce Feldman and somebody else, maybe Ralph Russo or somebody. And it was kind of taking stock of the James Franklin era at Penn State. And he talks about last year. They talked about last season when Penn State made the playoffs and how there were like 3 really close calls in the regular season. Because for the vast majority of teams, 95% of teams, maybe 99% of the teams, if you're going to have a successful year, there's going to be a handful of games where you just kind of escape by the skin of your teeth. Pitt's ACC championship season, right? The game when they clinched the Coastal Division, when they beat Virginia. Like Jordan Addison had to rip an interception away from a defender. Like you needed this sort of superhuman type of play to win that game. Because I think if you're Pitt or you're most schools, if you're going to have a successful season, if you're going to stack wins, if you're going to compete for a conference championship, you're going to have a couple games where either the ball needs to bounce your way or you win when maybe you just didn't play all that well. And I think what we saw tonight was a game where Pitt just didn't play all that well, and they still won by 3 scores on the road. Pretty good. Michael White says, nice to see Pitt win by a decent margin, but that felt like a classic Pitt-Syracuse game. No one walks away particularly happy. Yeah, it feels about right. It feels about right. TVAX1 says, we win. Penalties. Pitt 13 for 114 and Syracuse 12 for 107. Yeah, Pitt had more points, more penalties. They had everything. ZC717 says, Yassine Willis, a former Pitt recruit, 14 carries for 21 yards. They definitely held him in check. Yeah, Yassine Willis committed to Pitt in that recruiting class, whatever one that was, 23 or something like that. 14 carries for 21 yards. He also caught 1 pass for -3 yards. He had a drop. They didn't credit him with a drop, but he had 3 targets and only caught 1 pass. I think he had at least 1 drop. That one where he was complaining about his visor or something like that. So, he's a good player, though. And I think, I like Pitt's running back depth, but I think Yassine Willis could help them. Ramon Escalante said the Syracuse freshman quarterback had an unmolded mouthpiece on his face mask. He had no intentions of playing in that game. What a weird decision by Fran Brown to bring in the freshman quarterback for a drive or two. How long did he play? Did he play only 1 drive? Get my notes out. So many things happen in a game. It's hard to remember what happened. Syracuse, 11 was at quarterback for their first drive of the second half. And their second drive. Oh, yeah, he played all the way up to 3rd down of Syracuse's 3rd drive in the second half. So he had 2 possessions, 2.5 possessions. And then Ricky Collins came back in. And Collins took a sack when he, Nick James. Nick James should have got credit for that sack. I don't think they credited Nick James. Who did they give the 2 sacks to? Nick Lappy and Isaiah Neal. I think Nick James deserved credit for that sack when Collins came back in. But you're right. What a weird decision by Fran Brown to put the freshman quarterback in. I'm not really sure. I guess he was looking for a spark, but he didn't get it. Super chatter Jonathan Liberatore says downers are no fun, 10-2 until proven otherwise. Hey, brother, I'll drink to that. I think this is the kind of game where you can say, look, if they play like this in the remaining 5 games, they're not going to win all 5. But you can also say, well, maybe they got it out of their system and they were able to play poorly and still come out with a win. Let's see. Now I went over to the super chatters. Now I got to come back to the regular chats and see what I can find. See if I can catch up to where we were. Mark Shilaju says Pitt played really sloppy, but the refs really could have held their flags on some of the penalties. The Turner touchdown was a complete letter of the law and not a spirit of rule BS call. Yeah, so I think that was on Kenny Johnson. He seemed to have he was kind of holding the guy. I mean, I think you look at what Kenny Johnson did on that play and be like, well, yeah, that meets the letter. That meets the definition of a hold. And, considering that Ja'Kirian Turner ran right through that area, you could say that had an impact on the play. So it's too bad. That would have been a pretty nice play for Pitt, obviously. I think Ja'Kirian Turner is still pretty good. You just got to get him on the perimeter. You got to get him on the perimeter. Same thing with Desmond Reed. You have to get him on the perimeter. I don't think they're good enough run blocking team to run between the tackles, and I don't think their running backs are really built to run between the tackles. And when you get them on the perimeter, they can turn the corner and go. And they might pick up 6 or 7 yards, and they might pick up 26 or 27 or 56 or 57. Like, that's the kind of backs they are, and you've got to use their strengths and use them to the best of their abilities. Grant Sakuda says tonight's game had shades of the 2024 Cal game. Did what we had to do to win, but serious long-term questions. Hoping we can learn from how last year went and respond appropriately. Yeah, I don't know if I feel like there are long-term questions from this game. I think they have to block better. They have to, operate the offense better. Gerard says on a positive note, Kenny Johnson looked explosive. That's because he is. He's good. Kenny Johnson's really good. I don't think there's any, this should not be a surprise to us anymore, Gerard. And not saying you're surprised, but this should not be a surprise to us. Ramon Escalante says, Panarduzzi has moved on from so many coaches over his tenure and somehow currently has his worst staff of his entire tenure at Pitt. I don't agree with that at all. I think the defensive staff is really good. And I think the offensive staff, like Cade Bell, I would put no worse than third among Narduzzi's offensive coordinators. I mean, I put him above Frank Cignetti, Sean Watson. I'd probably put him above Jim Chaney. So, I mean, he's like right behind Mark Whipple for one really good year and Matt Canada for one really good year. And I think there's a high ceiling for Cade Bell and what he can become. So I don't think this is Narduzzi's worst staff. Brian Skokowski says, shout out to Fran Brown for looking like a complete tool and leaving the stickers on his hat like a teenager trying to be cool. I didn't notice that, and I don't care. He made mistakes at the end of the first half and gave Pitt a touchdown, but otherwise, I didn't notice his hat, and I don't care. Let's see. Dale Gribble says, sometimes I wish I was on the sideline so I could scream at the quarterback, just run the ball. If nobody's open, stop running in circles. I mean, he tried to scramble at times. I mean, yeah, he spun around a couple times, but he tried to scramble. And they caught him. They caught him from behind. There were a couple times where they blitzed, sent an all-out blitz. They blitzed like 5 or 6 guys. And, if Heinzel could have escaped one guy, he takes off for a huge gain, but just couldn't get away. Got caught. So, scrolling through here, seeing what you guys are saying, just kind of catching up. I mean, most of the comments I'm scrolling through right now were posted about 45 minutes ago. Josh Newark says, why is Des Reed playing last week and tonight? If he does have an ankle injury, get him healthy first. I mean, you saw last week what he can do. And I don't think he was 100% last week either. And he goes for 155 yards. I think you saw a couple flashes. The play where he had the stiff arm, they got called for a face mask penalty. I mean, this is what he can do. He's a playmaker. He's really good, even when he's less than 100%. So if he's healthy enough to get on the field and play, you got to use him and maximize him because he's one of your best players and he's a playmaker. Let's see. Super Chatter OB comes in and says the chase is still on. I'm assuming you're talking about Pitt in the ACC, where they're now 3-1 in the conference play and 5-2 overall. I haven't even, with Pitt playing a game at this time of day, I haven't really been paying all that close attention to the ACC scoreboard. But let's look around. Beating Georgia State first conference loss. Virginia barely escaped against Washington State in a non-conference game. Boston College lost to UConn in a non-conference game. SMU won at Clemson. Clemson is now 3-4 overall, 2-3 in the ACC. And then Friday night, Louisville won at Miami, and North Carolina lost at Cal. So, a lot of opportunities still out there. Louisville obviously would have the tiebreaker over Pitt, having beat Pitt head-to-head, and both teams having one loss in conference play. Georgia Tech's still undefeated in the ACC. Pitt's got a chance. They'll play Georgia Tech in the penultimate game of the regular season. So, if you're looking big picture, you're looking at the ACC race, Pitt's going to have opportunities there for sure. All right, we're past 12:30. It's a Saturday night, folks. I think. Actually, this is a good one. Gary Landefeld says, where was Drip Harrison tonight? I didn't see him on the injury report and did not notice him on the field. That's actually a really good point. I didn't see Shadarian Harrison at all either. And he was not on the injury report. You're right. Or actually, we should call it the availability report. So, if there was something other than an injury going on, he would have been listed there, but he was not. And did not play. I didn't see him once. You're absolutely right. I saw Rashad Battle. I saw Tamon Lynham. I saw Sean Lee Jr. I never saw Shadarian Harrison. That's a great point by you, Gary. That's something we're going to have to look into and ask Pat Narduzzi about. If they didn't ask him in the post game, we'll have to ask him about it on Monday. But all right, I think we'll wrap it up now. We're past 12:30. It's late. I'm tired. You're tired. We just saw a game that was truly a football game. But it ended with winning 30-13. Panthers improved to 5-2 overall, 3-1 in the ACC. And they've obviously got some things to work on as they head into next Saturday's game against NC State at Acrisure Stadium. But listen, thanks to everybody for tuning in tonight on the live stream. I know it's a late one, but I appreciate everybody who stayed up with us. It was fun as always. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We're closing in on 5,000 subscribers on YouTube, which for me would be a pretty big number. So if you're watching this video, if you're listening to the podcast and you're not subscribed, just do us a favor and go over and click the subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Try and get those numbers up. Meanwhile, stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com. We'll have lots of coverage from Syracuse, where Jim is covering the game. And, we'll have lots of content for you moving through this weekend and into the next week as Pitt gets ready to host NC State next Saturday at Acrisure Stadium. So thanks for watching tonight. Make sure you like and subscribe. Pitt wins 30-13. It wasn't a good game, but it was a game, and it ended up being a win, which that's the goal, right? That's the goal. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching tonight, and have a good rest of your night. Enjoy your weekend, and we will catch up with you Monday morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.